If you asked anyone in our neighborhood growing up who the best kid on the block was, the answer was always the same. Kyle, my older brother, the golden boy, the one teachers adored, coaches relied on, and parents used as an example to scold their own children. "Why can't you be more like Kyle?" was practically a catchphrase in our school district. Even our own parents used it on me. Constantly. To the world. Kyle was kindness and charisma wrapped in a football jersey and an honor roll certificate. But to me, he was cruel. Not in an obvious, punch-you-in-the-face kind of way. No, Kyle was too smart for that. He was calculating. He knew exactly how to make you feel worthless without ever raising his voice. He could gut you with a sentence and make it sound like a compliment. He was 2 years older than me, but somehow it always felt like the gap was decades wide. He treated me like a prop in the stage play of his life, something to step over or use to make himself look better. If I ever got a compliment from a teacher, he'd find a way to twist it into a joke by dinner time. "Oh, wow, you spelled all your words right." Someone give him a medal. Everyone would laugh. I'd laugh too, pretending it didn't sting. But it always did. Kyle had a talent for making me feel invisible. He would interrupt me, talk over me, correct me in front of others, even when he was wrong. And whenever I tried to stand up for myself, he'd tilt his head and go, "Whoa, what's up with you? Calm down, man. I'm just kidding." That's how he always got away with it. Just kidding. The two words that erased every jab, every sneer, every cutting remark. And if I pushed back harder, then I was the problem. My parents never saw it. Or maybe they did and just didn't care. Kyle was the star of the family. I was the background noise, the backup character. My dad took him to games, bragged about him at work. My mom would glow every time he entered the room. Meanwhile, I had to fight for attention, for space, for basic decency. By the time I was 15, I had learned to stay out of his way. It was easier that way, less painful, but you can only swallow your feelings for so long before they start eating you from the inside. I never told anyone what Kyle was really like behind closed doors. I didn't think they'd believe me. And maybe I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. Maybe I kept hoping he'd change, that he'd grow up and out of it, that one day he'd see me not as competition, not as a threat to his spotlight, but as a brother, a real one. But I was wrong, because this story doesn't get better from here. It only gets darker. And it all started unraveling the day he crossed a line so deep, so personal. It broke something inside me that's never healed. And now, I'm finally ready to tell the truth. I thought moving out would give me peace. I was wrong. Even after I left our parent house, Kyle found ways to stay in control. He had this way of showing up when I least expected him. At my job, at my apartment, even once at a date I didn't tell anyone about. It was like he had this radar for any time I was doing okay without him. One afternoon, he showed up at my door with a six-pack and a fake smile. "Just wanted to check on you, bro," he said. But I knew better. I told him I was busy, but he pushed past me like it was still his house. Sat on my couch, turned on my TV, and started flipping through Netflix like he lived there. It sounds small, but that moment hit me like a ton of bricks. He never saw me as a person with my own space or choices. I was a part of his world, and in his world, I didn't get to say no. Things escalated when I started setting boundaries. I told him not to come by uninvited. He laughed, literally laughed in my face. "You've changed, man. What? Too good for your own family now." That phrase became his weapon of choice. Any time I stood up for myself, I was the villain. I was the ungrateful brother, the traitor. The thing is, everyone believed him. He was charming. He'd show up at our parents' house with stories about how I was pushing the family away, how I was cold and selfish. My mom actually called me one night crying, asking what they'd done wrong to make me hate them. Kyle did that. And worst of all, I still answered his calls. The worst part about growing up with someone like Kyle wasn't just the gaslighting, the manipulation, or even the favoritism. It was the rewriting of every story so that I was always the problem. I remember this one weekend vividly. I had spent weeks prepping for a school project that was worth nearly half my final grade. I made a model, a slideshow, and even printed out handouts for the class. I kept it all in a box in the garage to bring to school on Monday. On Sunday afternoon, I heard loud crashing sounds from the garage. I rushed in and saw Kyle standing over the box, holding a deflated basketball. He said, "Chill, I didn't know your nerd stuff was in there." The project was ruined. When I told our parents, Kyle jumped into full-on Oscar-winning performance mode. I didn't know. I was just looking for my ball. He left his stuff all over the garage like he owns the place. He even had the audacity to say, "Why does he always blame me for everything?" And just like that, I was the one being yelled at for not communicating better, for being too sensitive, for not being a team player. I sat there with my stomach twisted in knots as my dad lectured me about accountability and responsibility, while Kyle leaned smugly against the wall, arms crossed, victorious. Again, that wasn't the only time he turned the tables like that. Every disagreement, every broken item, every failure became my fault because he was always one step ahead, manipulating the narrative like a puppet master. He made sure everyone believed I was the unstable one, the angry one, the jealous one. And when you hear it enough, when it's reinforced by your own parents, you start to believe it too. I wasn't just being gaslit, I was being erased. And still no one saw it. No one questioned him, until someone finally did. But that comes later. By the time I was 17, things had gone beyond typical sibling fights. Kyle's toxic behavior wasn't just confined to our home anymore. It was bleeding into my entire life. And I didn't even realize how much damage he'd done until one night. Everything came crashing down. It started with my closest friends. I had a small group of people I trusted. People I thought saw the real me, not the shadow Kyle painted. But then, out of nowhere, I noticed the invitations stopped coming. Messages went unanswered. People I used to hang out with regularly suddenly acted distant, cold, or busy. At first, I thought I'd done something wrong. Maybe I said or did something that hurt them. I tried calling, texting, asking them what was going on, but no one wanted to talk. Then, one day, a friend who used to be like a brother to me sent me a message that changed everything. He said, "Kyle's been telling us things about you, stuff that's not true. He says you're untrustworthy, that you talk behind people's backs, that you're manipulative." I didn't want to believe him at first, but the message stopped there. I sat with my phone shaking. How could Kyle, my own brother, do this to me? What had he said? Why? When I confronted him, of course, he denied it. "I never said that," he said, with that same smug look he always got when he was caught, but knew he could twist the story. "You're just being paranoid." But it wasn't paranoia. It was reality. Kyle was systematically poisoning my relationships. He didn't want me to have friends. He didn't want me to have support outside of the family. The more isolated I became, the easier I was to control. What hurt even more was that some of my friends believed him, because Kyle was charming and convincing. They trusted the golden boy over the quiet kid who was always the punching bag. That night, I cried for the first time in years. Not just because I lost friends, but because the person who was supposed to protect me was the one tearing me apart from the inside. And this was only the beginning. By the time I reached my senior year, Kyle wasn't just ruining my friendships. He was attacking my sense of self so deeply, I barely recognized the person staring back at me in the mirror. It happened during our senior prom. I had been saving up, planning, and even found a date, someone I genuinely liked and trusted. I thought, for once, things might be okay. But Kyle had other plans. A week before the prom, my date called me in tears. She said you told her you don't care about her, that you're only using her for attention. My date whispered through the phone. I was stunned. I hadn't said anything like that. I barely even talked about my feelings. When I confronted Kyle, he smiled that cold, sly smile. "Oh, please. You think I'd let you have a normal life? You think you deserve it?" he said, voice dripping with contempt. He told everyone rumors, lies about me, that I was selfish, cruel, and dishonest, that I was playing people to get ahead. The worst part? Some people believed him. Even teachers and other students who barely knew me whispered behind my back. I became the joke. the outcast, the one nobody trusted. At home, my parents began to question me more, just like Kyle had trained them to do. They'd say, "Are you sure you're not overreacting?" Or, "Maybe Kyle is right this time." The isolation was suffocating. And the date? She broke things off, saying she didn't want to be caught in my family's drama. I felt like I lost everything at once. That night, I sat alone in my room, feeling like I was drowning in a sea of lies, and the one person who could save me was the one sinking me deeper. After prom, my life felt like it was spiraling into a black hole. The rumors Kyle spread had shattered everything I had built, my friendships, my reputation, even the little self-esteem I managed to hold on to. I became a ghost in my own world, avoided by teachers who once encouraged me, ignored by classmates who used to say hi in the hallways, and distanced from family gatherings where Kyle ruled with his usual smug smile. Everywhere I turned, it felt like walls were closing in. At school, whispers and sideways glances were constant. I could hear the hushed conversations stop when I walked by, and even the people who once pretended to be friends began to question if I was really the person Kyle described. It crushed me inside. The isolation was suffocating. One afternoon, after an especially brutal day, when my locker was vandalized and a teacher unfairly scolded me over a mistake Kyle caused, I found myself wandering aimlessly, trying to hold back tears. The weight of loneliness and betrayal crushed me. I felt like no one believed me, like I was trapped in a nightmare where the villain was my own brother. I ended up on the rooftop of my apartment building, sitting on the cold concrete, staring blankly at the city lights. The vastness of the city contrasted sharply with how small and broken I felt. I wanted to scream, to disappear, to escape the constant pain that seemed to swallow me whole. I thought about giving up, letting the darkness win. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Emily. I barely knew her, just a girl in one of my classes, but she'd always been kind, quiet, and observant. The message was simple but powerful. "I know it's hard right now. You don't have to go through this alone." That small message was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. We started talking every day after that. Emily didn't judge me. She never questioned the truth of what I was telling her. She listened like I mattered, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not the broken version of me that Kyle wanted everyone to believe in, but the real me. With Emily's support, I began to pick up the pieces. I started going back to therapy, something I had avoided for years. I learned about boundaries, about recognizing toxic behavior, and about reclaiming my sense of self. Slowly, I started to believe that I was more than Kyle's puppet. I was more than the lies and rumors. But Kyle was watching, and as I grew stronger, his attacks only intensified. He saw that his control was slipping, and he wasn't going to let go without a fight. He began showing up unannounced at my house, making scenes in front of Emily, trying to intimidate her. He spread even darker rumors about me, trying to ruin my chance at applying for college. He even got some mutual friends to cut me out completely, reinforcing the isolation he thrived on. But I wasn't the scared kid I used to be. With Emily by my side and therapy helping me stand taller, I realized I could fight back, not with anger or revenge, but with truth and boundaries. That night on the rooftop was my lowest point, but it was also the beginning of the climb out of the darkness. After that night on the rooftop, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep living under Kyle's shadow, drowning in lies and pain. But fighting someone like him felt impossible. He was always 10 steps ahead, charming everyone around me, twisting the truth, turning allies into enemies. But with Emily's support, I started building a plan. The first step was setting clear boundaries. I told my parents everything. No sugarcoating, no holding back. I showed them proof. Texts, recorded conversations, witnesses. For once, I was honest and direct. To my surprise, some had finally sunk in. My dad was reluctant, but Mom looked like she was starting to see the truth for the first time. Next, I stopped answering Kyle's calls immediately. Instead, I started documenting everything. Every insult, every manipulation, every lie. I kept a journal, wrote down dates, times, what was said and done. It felt exhausting, but I knew I needed a record in case things escalated. Then I reached out to a counselor at school. It was awkward, but I finally admitted how toxic Kyle's behavior was. The counselor connected me with resources and even talked to my parents, helping them understand what I was going through. But Kyle didn't back down. In fact, he stepped up his game. When I tried to explain my side to friends who cut me off, he showed up with his version first, casting me as a crazy, ungrateful sibling. Still, little by little, cracks started to appear in his armor. Some friends started questioning the stories he told. Some teachers stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. And I felt, for the first time, like maybe I wasn't alone in this. It wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't a Hollywood-style turnaround. It was slow, painful, and often lonely. But every day I fought back was a victory. By this point, Kyle knew he was losing ground. The walls were closing in on his perfect image, and his favorite puppet, me, was no longer willing to dance to his tune. He started showing up unannounced everywhere. At school, he'd hang around just to make sure I wasn't comfortable. At my part-time job, he'd try to cause scenes with my coworkers, whispering lies and stirring drama. Once, he even followed me home, just standing outside until I saw him and went inside. He was desperate, but I wasn't afraid anymore. With Emily and my counselor's help, I started standing my ground. I learned how to calmly deflect his provocations instead of reacting. When he tried to gaslight me, I reminded myself of the truth, backed by my journal, messages, and witnesses. When he tried to isolate me, I reached out to people who believed me and rebuilt friendships from the ground up. The biggest breakthrough came when I finally confronted my parents again, not just with stories, but with evidence. I sat them down, showed them the proof of Kyle's manipulation, the recordings, the texts, the lies he spread. It was the hardest conversation I've ever had. My mom broke down crying, admitting she had been blinded by Kyle's charm. My dad looked ashamed but promised to be more supportive. That day felt like a turning point. Kyle was furious, but I felt free. Once my parents finally started seeing the truth about Kyle, the atmosphere at home shifted dramatically, but not without tension. For years, my brother had been the center of attention, the golden child, and now suddenly he was being confronted. That didn't go down quietly. At first, Kyle acted like nothing was wrong. He smiled, joked, tried to charm everyone around him to make it seem like I was the problem. But behind closed doors, the mood was thick with silent battles. I could feel his resentment simmering, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it exploded. While that war played out at home, I focused on rebuilding myself. I started dedicating more time to things I loved, writing, music, and even volunteering. I surrounded myself with friends who genuinely cared, and with Emily's unwavering support, I slowly began to rediscover who I was without Kyle's toxic influence. Therapy sessions helped me unpack years of emotional damage. I learned about codependency, manipulation tactics, and how to recognize when someone is gaslighting you. I finally understood that none of Kyle's behavior was my fault. One of the hardest things was forgiving myself for believing his lies for so long, for letting him convince me I was the bad guy. But every day I moved forward, I reclaimed a piece of myself. Despite the tension, I refused to back down. I set firm boundaries. No more unsolicited visits, no more lies, no more manipulation. I told Kyle plainly that I wasn't a pawn anymore and meant it. It wasn't easy. The fights at home were brutal. Kyle tried every trick, guilt trips, emotional blackmail, even threats. But I stayed strong, holding on to the hope that one day I'd be free. And slowly, that hope turned into reality. After years of feeling trapped under Kyle's shadow, things began to shift in a way I never imagined possible. The turning point came when I got accepted into a university far away from home. For the first time, I had a real escape plan, an opportunity to build a life on my own terms, away from the toxicity that had poisoned my childhood. But leaving wasn't easy. Kyle tried everything to sabotage it. He spread rumors at my school that I was only leaving because I was running away from problems I caused. He called our parents nonstop, trying to convince them to stop supporting me. But this time they stood by me. On move-out day, Kyle showed up at the house, looking furious but defeated. I felt no fear. I was ready. As I packed the last of my things, Kyle threw one last fit, accusing me of being selfish, ungrateful, and abandoning the family. I didn't respond. I just looked him in the eyes and said, "I'm done living in your world." Driving away that day, I felt a mix of sadness, relief, and a flicker of hope. College was hard, new environment, new challenges, but I thrived. I made real friends who didn't judge me based on family drama. I studied hard, rediscovered passions Kyle tried to crush, and started to heal. For the first time, I was living for me. But Kyle's influence didn't disappear overnight. He kept trying to worm his way into my life, using social media, mutual acquaintances, even my parents to stay connected. It was a reminder that toxic family ties don't just vanish when you move away. After moving away, I quickly learned that distance alone wasn't enough to escape Kyle's toxicity. He didn't give up. Instead, he tried new ways to pull me back in, manipulating mutual friends, sending passive-aggressive messages on social media, and even guilt-tripping my parents into sharing updates about my life. At first, I tried to keep the peace, answering some messages, pretending things were okay, but that just gave Kyle openings to sneak back into my world. So I made a hard decision. I blocked him everywhere. No calls, no texts, no social media. It felt like cutting off a part of my past that had caused me so much pain. The silence was strange at first, but also healing. I told my parents I needed their support in maintaining these boundaries. It wasn't easy for them, especially since they'd always been more forgiving of Kyle's behavior. But over time, they understood that my mental health came first. With these boundaries in place, I could finally focus on building a healthy life. I dove deeper into therapy, learned self-care routines, and built friendships based on trust and respect. I even started speaking openly about my experiences, helping others who dealt with toxic family members see that they weren't alone. Kyle wasn't in control anymore, but healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. Some days, I'd still doubt myself, wondering if I was too harsh or if I should forgive him. But then I'd remember the person I was before all this, the scared, lonely kid, and realize how far I'd come. Just when I thought I had finally put Kyle behind me, life threw a curveball. It started with a call from my mom. Her voice was shaky, tired. "Kyle's in trouble," she said. "He needs help." My heart sank. After everything, after all the pain he caused me, hearing those words stirred up a confusing mix of anger, guilt, and pity. I wasn't sure what to do. Over the next few weeks, I found out Kyle had gotten into serious legal trouble, something that could land him in jail. The details were murky, but involved money, lies, and a few bad decisions spiraling out of control. Despite everything, a part of me wanted to help, but another part screamed to stay away, to protect myself. The pressure from my parents was intense. They wanted me to step in, to be the bigger person, to help my brother. But I realized helping didn't mean sacrificing my boundaries. I met with Kyle once more in a neutral place to hear him out. The conversation was raw and painful. He apologized, sort of, but there was no real accountability. No true understanding of the damage he'd caused. I knew then that some people never change, and that protecting myself had to come first, no matter how hard it was. That moment was a turning point. I could choose to be dragged back into the toxic cycle, or finally close that chapter for good. After that painful meeting with Kyle, I realized something crucial. No matter how much I wanted things to be different, I couldn't fix him. I couldn't carry the weight of his mistakes or protect him from himself. For years, I had lived trapped in a cycle of trying to prove my worth to him, to our family, to the world. But now, I understood that my worth didn't depend on his approval or acceptance. I made the decision to fully cut ties. It wasn't easy. The guilt was overwhelming. My parents struggled to accept it. Friends questioned if I was being too harsh. But every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered the years of pain, the manipulation, the lies, the constant undermining of who I was. I started focusing on healing, on building a life that was truly mine. I found joy in simple things again, writing, art, real friendships, and most importantly, peace. Cutting ties with Kyle wasn't about hatred. It was about self-respect and survival. I finally had the courage to put myself first. Cutting ties with Kyle didn't just mean ending contact with my brother. It meant rebuilding my entire life from the ground up. The fallout wasn't just between me and him. It affected my relationship with my parents, who had to confront their own denial and the reality they'd ignored for years. I realized that healing was a straight path. It was messy, complicated, and painful. At first, I felt isolated, like I was losing my family. But over time, I learned to set boundaries with my parents too, asking for honesty, respect, and support rather than blind loyalty to Kyle. Therapy continued to be a lifeline, helping me process trauma, understand my worth, and develop healthier patterns in relationships. Slowly, I started trusting people again, not blindly, but carefully, with intention. I rebuilt friendships and even opened up to new people in ways I never thought possible. Most importantly, I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about those who respect and uplift you. I may have lost a brother, but I gained myself. Looking back now, it's hard to believe how much of my life Kyle controlled, how deeply his toxicity shaped my sense of self and my relationships. But surviving that wasn't just about enduring pain. It was about reclaiming my life and learning to thrive beyond it. I've realized that toxic family members can leave scars, but they don't have to define us. Healing is messy, nonlinear, and ongoing, but it's possible. Setting boundaries, seeking support, and choosing myself are the hardest but most important acts of courage I've ever made. I rebuilt my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who truly care. I've learned to trust again, love again, and most importantly, forgive myself for the years lost trying to fix someone who never wanted to change. My story isn't just about pain. It's about survival, strength, and freedom. And if you're reading this, feeling trapped by a toxic family member, know this: you're not alone. You deserve peace, respect, and a life full of love. And sometimes that means walking away.